Hello to everyone. Welcome to the Nevada Women's Film Festival's program number 3, our live Q&A. My name is Samantha Rodriguez, and I'm running the behind the scenes. And I also have my partner, Jemsen Bollozos, who's also behind the scenes, helping us with tech. Both of us are co-founders of Eccentric Artists, working as the festival's executive committee this year. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Brett Levner, who is our moderator today. And Brett Levner is a member of the Nevada Women's Film Festival's board of directors, as well as an assistant professor of film at UNLV. So take it away, Brett.
Thank you. So just wanted to say welcome to our filmmakers. We have the directors of the 8th, or 2 of the 3. One is not here today, but Lucy Kennedy, but we'll keep her in spirit with us. We have Aideen, Kane, and we have Maeve O'Boyle. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes.
The film is just, oh my God. I watched, people had told me it was great, but until I sat down and watched it, I didn't really understand how impactful it was. It is. Especially I think maybe coming off of our last president and I guess in here feeling the risk of losing our rights. It's amazing. I'm so grateful for you guys for making this film. I guess the first question I have is, how did it come to fruition? What was the seed that brought all 3 of you together to make this film?
I'll kick off, Aideen, and you can chime in. So the 3 of us came together back in 2016. Aideen and I had known each other before that, however, for many, many years. And I know that we had had a chat before 2016 regarding this issue. We'd been following it. We were both living in the States at the time, and we were really interested in what was going on in Ireland. And Aideen had met Lucy Kennedy, who is an investigative journalist as well, and she kind of proposed that the 3 of us could come together and join forces to get to tackle such a massive subject. So we decided that we would go ahead and do it. And essentially, we did a good year of research before we jumped into filming, and it was kind of from 2016 to 2017. And by 2017, we were on the ground in Ireland filming, the 3 of us, to document it. You go ahead and fill in the blanks.
Just to add, I suppose, because we get asked about it a lot, that 3 of us, we'd all been working in film, and we'd all grown up in Ireland under the 8th Amendment. So we understood what was at stake in Ireland. And then we'd all worked in film in different capacities in Ireland and in the States. And we were just at that stage in our careers where we were looking for something, as opposed to being hired to do something. We just wanted to start something ourselves. And we did agree as 3 creatives and 3 women to work together on an equal footing. And it was for many reasons. One, because making an independent film is so huge, it takes so long. We were funding as we went along. And then we were also juggling, other projects, other films. So yeah.
And what is the history between the 3 of you? When did you meet? I guess, what are the benefits to working collaboratively like this? Like you mentioned earlier, but maybe we can tell it for the audience. This is an interesting way of working kind of like a collective together. And what are the positive aspects of that?
Okay, go ahead, Aideen.
I suppose, first off, we all brought very specific skills. I mean, I'd been a producer for 25 years, facilitating other people's stories. Lucy she was beginning to direct, but she had been in public television. She'd been a commissioned editor. She had done a journalism degree. And Maeve had been editing and storytelling and beginning to produce and beginning to direct. So we all brought very specific skills. But I think that, and then we all wanted to direct this together. So I think that was one of the kind of the genesis of everything. The 3 pieces worked perfectly together. This was going to be a big film. There was a whole legal side. There was a historical and social side. And then we knew it would be a huge fundraising effort. We knew this was going to be expensive to make, and it was an Irish story, but we were going to look for an international audience and international funding. So that was kind of the foundation of coming together. And Maeve, if you want to chat a little bit about the collaboration and pros and cons.
I think that it was just a really interesting endeavor in the sense of on the ground actually documenting the issue. We knew it was a massive issue. It was happening all over Ireland, and because we were filming so many different storylines, it was incredibly useful to have the three of us able to be able to be split up, and you do this over here, we'll go over here. The referendum day, I remember the week leading into it, the three of us were always in different places. We had different camera people in different places, and we were working together, and then coming back and sometimes looking at the scenes together and reacting and thinking this is going to be great, and sort of kind of actively kind of storytelling as we were going. And so it was a really wonderful way of bouncing ideas off each other and trying to come up with a kind of really strong narrative arc for the edit. And it was the same in the edit as well. And one of the great things was that we could always kind of hand off to someone else. If we were stuck, we would be like, can you take this so that, I can go and do something else. And that kind of went across from pre-production, production to post-production. So it was just a really great collaboration. But also, as I say, I think one of the lovely things, it can be a lonely process making a film. And one of the best things about it was bouncing ideas off each other and being able to get someone else's thoughts on an idea and run with it. So yeah,
that's so interesting, because the movement is collaborative, and I feel like the filmmaking is collaborative. It just creates a spirit of it's pretty awesome. Did you face any resistance in Ireland to filming this? Challenges that you kind of encountered along the way because just the topic?
We one of the things that was really important to us was, and to add, it stems from the last answer as well, is that each of us held the others accountable, like to our own personal politics and to all sorts of decision making in the filming, and the editorial decisions. So there was this wonderful rigor attached to each of us, having a group of three that I think was even, better than just a group of two. So, but by the same token, something that we'd agreed very early on was that this would be a very considered approach to the subject. And we wanted to document what was happening in Ireland, which meant documenting both sides of the debate. We wanted the film to be considered, to be nuanced, to give voice and lift up all of the voices that were involved in this conversation in Ireland. So we approached everyone. Once we decided who we thought could be key protagonists in the film, we then started our outreach. And it wasn't that we got resistance, but maybe some people were more willing to be involved than others. So there was a natural, and the other piece to remember was that very quickly after we started filming, the country was thrown into a campaign. It was decided that within a matter of months that the country would vote on this issue. So political campaigns were started on both sides of the issue. And so us as filmmakers asking people to share their thoughts or opinions, they were in political campaign mode. And so we weren't a priority for them. So we felt resistance on that from both sides. It's like we were kind of like, okay, we know it's important to document it. We are creating a living archive. But at the same time, my focus is on a political campaign. So I think, I'm sure you've thoughts on that as well.
Well, I mean, I suppose, when we originally decided to do it, the three of us sat down and we really did talk about the issue at hand and talk about where we stood with it. And obviously the three of us were coming at it from a pro-choice perspective, and any good film has a point of view, and we knew that we would have a point of view, but it was very important for us in the early conversations to bring in the other side and approach it, as best we could in an even-handed way. So that was really the approach. But I think, the point of view part and the nuance part were both really key to the way we approached making the film.
Interesting. Where when you went about casting, or did you already have Alva and Andrea, the two kind of subjects that you follow in the film? Did you already have them in mind, or did you go through a casting process?
We spent a good year researching the topic, and we met many incredible activists across the board all over the country, but it was fairly clear early on that Alva was an incredibly central figure in this whole campaign, and she'd been fighting this fight for her whole life, really. The stakes were massive for her. She had this vantage point, given her age, that, you know, this really mattered and she needed to get this over the line. So it just she felt like an absolutely natural fit, not to mention that she's incredibly compassionate, articulate, and, you know, an incredible activist. So that was Alva. Do you want to take Andrea in terms of finding Andrea? Yeah.
So when we met Andrea, we were just immediately drawn to her. I mean, first off, she's a really successful business person. She, you know, her previous career was in marketing. I mean, she has a very successful business, but she had had 10 or 15 years behind her of marketing. She's so skilled at social media, but she's also just passionate. She was passionate about these issues, and what attracted us to her was she was gearing up for a very different type of activism and a very different audience. She was responding to what she didn't see of herself in maybe the more traditional feminist world or feminist activism. And so her goal was to speak to herself and to people she felt were like her, to find them where they were at, and then to bring a form of activism to them, or to spawn a form of activism from them that would, you know, suit them and speak their truths. So yeah, she was just, we were thrilled that both of them, you know, agreed to be in it. And we did also start filming with other people as well, but a documentary, essentially it's 90 minutes. It's only going to be able to sustain 3 or 4 main protagonists. So yeah, we were very lucky that both of those agreed early on to be part of it.
And also, I would say the other thing about Andrea was, because she was involved with a lot of the cultural, artistic endeavors politically, it was a really interesting layer that we could bring into the film that would add energy and would in a way kind of tap into the young movement, because it was an incredible grassroots movement in Ireland around this issue, and we felt that she would speak to that. So that was really important for us too.
That's so interesting, because they're both fascinating subjects, and they're great on camera. And I mean, they have something that draws you in. But it's interesting because they do have 2 different approaches, like you said, and Alva has I think the more, I don't know, traditional grassroots approach to what's the word, getting fighting our campaign, and Andrea has that, like you said, a youthful with the social media and the marketing and the whole, even just the branding of it with the repeal, and it's very interesting. But you're right, it hits both kind of marks. So I enjoy both of them, and they're likable. It's interesting because I realize when you're casting a documentary, I don't know, would you say that casting a documentary is similar to casting a fiction film, in the sense that you have to find these protagonists that people can connect to and relate to? Do you look for that when you're casting?
I think it's actually more complicated in a documentary, because you don't have a script, and they're completely free to whatever. So it's such an organic process. So you're really trusting your experience and your instinct. And you meet with people several times. You don't make a decision first off. I mean, Maeve had met Alva at an event. I had known of Alva for 25 years from when I was a student. Then we sat down with her for a couple of hours. Then Lucy went to meet with her. And then, then we started engaging. And so it's actually, I think it's harder to cast a documentary, and I don't like the word cast, but it's a relationship you're building, and for both sides. Like Alva and Andrea didn't really fully understand what they were getting into, and they had to put their trust in us. And it comes down to, I mean, Alva said it, she said, look, I thought you presented well, you knew what you were about, we knew you could do this. But yeah, it's a leap of faith on both sides.
It's interesting because it makes me think, when you have 3 directors, you have to build that relationship with your subject 3 times in order to gain their trust. Was that more challenging having 3 directors, or just part of the process?
I think, I was living in Ireland at the time, and Aideen and Lucy were flying in and out. And I met Alva a number of times, and then the guys came in and met her too. And I think, ultimately, and same with Andrea, we met first time Aideen and I met together. I think once, you know, they kind of, you know, met us maybe twice or so, and they had seen what we had done in the past in terms of our work. You know, there was, you know, we were building on that, you know what I mean? And then, you know, as time went on, we just built on it. I mean, it is a complicated relationship because it is all built around trust. But I think that I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but I feel like we worked on it collaboratively. Again, it was part of the collective three of us meeting them at different times, but maybe convincing them one-on-one, yeah, that we were capable of doing this. And maybe part of our past work experience was a helping hand too, for sure.
I think just to add to that though, each of us then did begin to nurture separate relationships, which was important. So, and it's just a practical thing sometimes. So you became that person's point of contact. So Lucy and Maeve and I would meet, we'd discuss something, and then the person who maybe had the primary relationship with that person would bring the information back and nudge it along. And we would sit before the bigger interviews and go, look, who's best placed to do this interview? Who's had the most exposure with this person? Who's had the most time? And because you're constantly like, we know how to do this, we've done it before, but we're bringing people into this world, and so you want to make sure they're comfortable and feel safe. So yeah, no, and having three, like, you know, at one point Lucy was way down in the south of Ireland following one character, I was over in the west of Ireland following canvassers, and Maeve was in Dublin following the headquarters. So it helped, and so we did as much as possible practically try to have a primary contact for the bigger relationships in the film.
Awesome. You know, and I don't know, you know, I think like maybe my generation and before, there was this this idea that women in the industry, we should tear each other down instead of work together. And so it's so wonderful to see an example of women working together and bringing their strengths together as you're doing here, which I guess is also what happened in the movement. Anyway, I don't know if you encountered that when you were, you know, starting out or in the industry. Did you encounter a sense that sometimes there was a competition between women, and now is it evolving and changing, or did you choose not to go that way?
I think I've been very lucky. I've worked with incredible women my entire career. I literally, and I've worked with women who have pulled me up, you know, by my bootstraps or behind them, or made space for me. And I hope I'm trying to do the same thing in the relationships that I'm working with. I mean, filmmaking is such a collaborative process. And I think one of the things is, even though there's some kind of hierarchical pieces in there, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter who has the best idea in the room, as long as the best idea is presented in the room and that everybody there is open to hearing it. And we certainly experienced that working on the 8th together. And also I will say that most of our funders were also women, and they all just rocked up. What can we do? How can we help you? How can we, you know, so yeah, that's been my experience anyway.
I feel like I've been lucky too, but one thing, it's so true that the film was made with predominantly women. It was made by women, and the funders, a lot of our funders were women. But actually it was really interesting to have like the men, the guys, basically the camera people, the graphics, the you know, creative people who engaged with the film, and the producer, our producer Alan Maher as well. Like there were, it was great to have you know, the men involved too, who cared about the issue and who really invested, you know what I mean? And so that actually mattered too, you know. But I think I've been lucky as well, like Aideen. Overall, I feel like I haven't really experienced that. I know that goes on, I guess, but I've been lucky. I guess I've been lucky. Yeah.
I wonder also because there's more female representation in film now, there's less need to be competitive, and it's more need to be collaborative. And I'm so happy to,
I will say that a lot of men helped me in my early stage of my career. You know, perhaps they were, you know, if you think back on it, back in the 90s, perhaps they were more in positions that they could help me versus the women in my, you know, kind of working life. But it certainly was helped by men as well as women, for sure.
Wonderful. Who were your inspirations, your mentors, people that led you to fall in love with documentary and want to work in it?
I suppose there's so many amazing documentary films that have touched me over the years. It's really hard to pick one or two. And I suppose I would be attracted to a lot of social issue documentaries. So I don't know. I don't have any one or I don't have, it's funny. We get asked this question a lot, and I hate saying it because then I'll go, oh, there's this other film, and then there's this other film I adore. But Maeve, do you have any particulars?
Well, documentaries change so much, but I just, if I go back and I bought a little time because you answered, but essentially I was racking my brain. Essentially, when I think back, when I started, in documentary as an editor, I was really interested in nasals, and that's obviously a very classic approach, but I was working in verite filmmaking at that point. So I loved Grey Gardens and things like that, like things where you would embed. I loved that idea of embedding and kind of document. And I certainly feel like with the three of us tried to kind of embed as best we could given the circumstances. It was a different kind of film, obviously, but I'm saying allowing those scenes to unfold is something that I adore in documentary. And I frankly, I do feel less and less of that is happening in the documentary space these days. It tends to go a different way and highly produced and so on and so forth. But the old Grey Gardens style, Maisels, I loved Pennebaker stuff, kind of the classics actually were a great, very inspirational in my early years for sure. And I think did influence the things that I wanted to film as I went on as a filmmaker and an editor.
In terms of ethics, do you make your own kind of line of objectivity when you make a film? Like, do you hold yourself accountable to what line you'll cross and not cross when making a documentary?
100%. We absolutely do. I think every single step of our process, there's kind of a code of ethics that we follow. I mean, it's drawn from experience, it's drawn from journalism, it's drawn from our collaboration with other filmmakers. And I think it's never been more important, ever. And I think it generally, it's on both. I think the conversation in the last few years, which I'm really thrilled about, is that it's not just ethics in front of the camera, it's behind the camera. It's how every single member of the team is treated, and every decision, every editorial decision. And I think we're lucky in social issue documentaries, particularly when they're not funded when they're not commissioned. We have so much more freedom around the decision making so that they can align with our own code of ethics. And I think we have a responsibility, a moral responsibility to everybody we come into contact with, from the crew to the people we film.
It's interesting because you see so much reality television, and they blur the line nowadays, and but there's some filmmakers that's documentarians that still try to remain as objective as they can be and ethical as they can be. But then you have the other end of the spectrum, and I guess it depends who you're working for and when you're working for. But when you're working for yourselves, I think it's inspiring to hear you say that, the importance of that, and that you build your reputation on that. And it's obviously very clear in this film. What was the most powerful moment for you in terms of in filming in this, in your film? What was the most important moment? I'm assuming maybe I don't know, you tell me, what was the most powerful moment for you when you were making this film? Poignant, powerful?
Well, for me, one of the most powerful moments was actually recording the women who had traveled. I found that so humbling, so incredible to listen to the journeys of women who had gone to the UK and beyond. And I was amazed at how different their experiences were, but equally horrendous. It felt very much like we were at the coalface talking to those women. And I was so incredibly grateful for women all over Ireland to be able to share those stories. But that was maybe the most profound moment for me in the process.
And for me, Brett, it was meeting Catherine Corliss, who is the historian that had been working for years to uncover the truth about the burial grounds in the mother and baby home in Tuam, County Galway. And Catherine, at the time we met her, she wasn't even free to really film with us because she was involved in another film. But she insisted, because the work she'd been doing as a local amateur historian was so important to her. And when we told her we were coming just to visit the site, so a local mother and baby home had been there for years, and then it had been demolished, and a children's public playground had built on the grounds, most of the grounds. And Catherine had uncovered that there were the remains of primarily babies and children, up to nearly 800, buried in those grounds. And she had been working for years to bring this to public attention and to make people accountable for it. So when we went to meet her, and we're walking around, and it's in the middle of a small country town, and she starts to move her feet on these mounds of grass. And she said, so you can see it here, you can see it. The ground has sunk because there's a little baby buried there. And I think all of us just reacted enormously. I'm a mother, I have a daughter, my own mother wasn't long, she had died. And I think it was this moment of, this is how women and children and vulnerable people have been treated in Ireland, that these babies were just wrapped in sheaths and buried in the ground with no ceremony. And in some cases, some of them were in the remains of waste system septic tanks. So that for me was the most powerful.
Wow, unbelievable. When I believe her name, Silva, was that her name? Silvita, who passed away during the filming. That was pretty impactful as well. How did that unfold, and how did you learn about that? I mean, assuming you were there as it was unfolding, and how did that, could you just take us back to that day and what that was like?
We weren't actually there. That was actually, that was archival footage from that particular period.
Oh, gotcha.
When it actually happened. So that was part of kind of what we called the historical vignette, and that we, interwove footage that we actually had that we got from an Irish filmmaker. I know myself, I was in New York, and we were outside the consulate, protesting actually after she died. It was a very dark day for anyone Irish in any part of the globe. Really, it was a terrible situation.
What was her name again, so I can get it correct?
Savita Halappanavar.
Okay, Salvita.
Yeah.
That was in 2012.
I see.
And you're right to bring it up, because it was a really pivotal moment in, resulting in the abortion laws being overturned. Because as Maeve said, like that I was in Ireland at the time, and it exploded outside of Ireland as well, which was really important, because it really started to force Irish politicians who were loath to engage in this, that they knew the eyes of the world were on Ireland. There were several European court cases at the time that had been going on or about to come to fruition. But this, I think, the public attention on the death of Savita really kind of started. It was a catalyst for the change that inevitably came.
Interesting. The fact that, and if I understand correctly, they told her she was going to miscarriage, but they wouldn't terminate the pregnancy because it still had a heartbeat to the baby, and she eventually passed away, and they knew she was going to pass away, but they couldn't save her because of the laws, I guess, at the time. Is that the understanding?
This is really important, and it's actually really, really prescient for the US today, because it's similar to the Texas situation, the heartbeat bill in Texas at the moment. So essentially what happened with the 8th Amendment, by putting this language in our Constitution and then subsequent amendments, that meant if the woman's life was in danger, doctors could act. But then the medical professions found themselves going, well, how much danger is she in? Am I going to be prosecuted? So there was a lot of complication around the Savita moment, but essentially, what you described is correct. They couldn't offer her a termination because of the heartbeat and, how to determine how much danger her life was in. And yes, she died.
Unbelievable. we have a question from the audience. What is the difference between making films in Ireland versus in Hollywood, especially if there's any differences in terms of being a woman filmmaker in Ireland versus Hollywood.
I suppose there's different parts of the industry. We work in documentary, which is very different from maybe, feature films or television or, incredibly competitive and commercial products. Not that documentaries aren't hugely commercial. So I suppose, and that's been most of I have worked a little bit in television. I don't know. I think women deal with the same, in my opinion, women deal with the same issues in whatever form of work they're taking. I just think in documentaries, it's a smaller industry, and if you have the choice about who you collaborate with, and I know the older I get, I'm very particular about who I collaborate with, because I only want to work with people that maybe represent the same values or work ethos or interested in the same things as I am, if I can help it.
Mm-hmm. On a very basic level as well, just to add in, here in Ireland, there's a state funding, Screen Ireland, basically, which did support the film from the early stages. So you could go to them, pitch the idea, which Aideen and I did, I remember, and they gave us development funding, and we were able to kind of put that forward to be able to get a trailer together or a sample, so there were different stages, but you were kind of, that kind of idea of the first money in is very hard to get. And so I suppose there is that kind of support system in Ireland, and I'm not sure in Hollywood. First of all, I don't know, and I've never worked in Hollywood, but I'm just not sure if there's the same support system for filmmakers who are trying to get something off the ground. But that I'm not sure, basically, but I don't know if there is. I wouldn't have thought there was.
That same sort of, there's a whole world of grant funding and philanthropic giving in the documentary world here, but it's not the same. These are public funds, essentially, a little bit like PBS or independent lens type funds. And then the other piece of that is that Ireland has an extraordinary tax incentive scheme for people that helps the arts. And so we were able to avail of that also. So we ended up funding the film 50% through those types of money in Ireland. And the beautiful thing about it is that if the film then if we do generate any revenue, some of that goes back in to help other projects, back into that public fund. So we're very lucky to have that in Ireland. For example, we recently released the film theatrically in Ireland and in the UK, and we were able to apply to both public monies to help support the theatrical launch, which doesn't exist here in the States. So that it was slightly easier for us to do this because we knew we had a certain budget we were working with straight away.
Mm. You both have very impressive resumes and previous projects that you've produced. What do you have going forward that we can look forward to seeing?
Maeve, go ahead.
I'm currently working on a film about the folk singer and activist Joan Baez.
Oh yes. Awesome.
So right in the middle of the edit, full on in the edit at the moment, and we filmed her over her final global tour in 2018 across the whole of Europe and the US, and she opened up her archive for the first time fully. So it's like her artwork, her quarter inches, her family home videos, her letters, her, you name it, we have it. It's a vast amount of material, and it's very rich because of the archival part of it. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. Yeah.
And I have another film that premiered around the same time as the 8th called Women in Blue. And for the first time in a year, we saw it in person at Tribeca last weekend. So that was lovely. It's already premiered. It had it broadcast on Independent Lens earlier this year. And then I'm partway through production of a film that I'm producing, and it's been directed by Abigail Disney and Kathleen Hughes, and it's about income inequality. It's very much an American story, and we're hoping to release that early in 2022.
Wonderful, amazing projects. Just wanted to, did you have any last pieces of advice, words, inspiration you want to give to aspiring documentarians out there?
I would say pick your collaborators well. Be really thoughtful about them because you're going to be with them for a very long time. And pick your subjects and your stories well, because you're also going to live with them for, we're now working since 2016. And we probably have about another 6 months or so of kind of being involved in the film quite regularly. So that would be my advice. Make sure you really enjoy the people you're working with and are really passionate about your subjects, the stories that you choose to get involved in.
And I would, I suppose, say, first of all, I completely agree with that. And that's kind of what I was going to say too. So I don't know what I'm going to say, but basically I would say, so I'll just put on my editing hat as usual when in need. And I would just say, hold on to the core idea of what you want to say and try to say it, because it's really easy to go off the tracks. So try and hold on to this core principle idea and always remember that that's what you're trying to say. So I know we've said this before, but in the edit, we had silence, stigma, shame on the wall for the 8th. And we tried, that was like our rope that we held on to while we were trying to make the film. And I just think that's a useful piece of advice for filmmakers who are young filmmakers who are out there trying to make a film.
And actually jumping off that, Maeve, because I think that's so critical, is if you can't write a summary of your film in 1 page, then you're not ready.
A good piece of advice.
And I also think that you return to that 1 page several times in the 5 years.
Yes.
And I'll give you an example. I mean, you write 1 million proposals, and very early on, a colleague helped us, took our idea and rewrote it. And they said, "Oh, you're doing a film on the history of women's rights in Ireland." And we said, "No, we're not." You know, and in actual fact, a huge amount of it was we were. So that 1 pager that you write for every single grant application, for every single press release, if you can't get it down on 1 page, then wait till you can before you start telling other people about the idea.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you two so much for being here today, for making such important work, for inspiring filmmakers, women filmmakers especially, and for creating a legacy. These films will live on forever. And so thank you so much for what you've done and continue to do. It was a pure honor to meet you guys. And I wish you the best moving forward with the film. And I'm looking forward to the next projects.
Thank
And
you.
just to say, we were so thrilled to be part of this film festival. It's really beautiful film festival, really powerful, really great film. So this was definitely one that was on our radar that we knew we wanted to be in. So thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.